Hey, 6 Degrees YouTube channel. My name is Chris Miller, and I'm here with the Executive Director, Stacy Huston. Stacy, you're in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. What's your favorite thing to do when you're in Washington, D.C.?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, right now, we're about to enter fall. All the colors are about to change. So I grew up in Southern California. We did not have seasons. It was just like beautiful or beautiful, sometimes rainy. And my favorite thing to do in Washington, D.C. is like to drive around, see all of the changing colors in the trees. And obviously the museums, I feel like that's like a catch-all. All of them are free. I don't think people know that, but like the museums in DC, for the most part, all the Smithsonians are free. So
we do have a little bit of a connection there because my mom grew up in Southern California. Did you grow up in Southern or NorCal?
Southern California. I didn't know your mom grew up there.
Right,
cool.
She did. And then she moved to Oklahoma, and that's where I grew up. So
why?
Why?
I want to know why.
Yeah, I'm on the question, and you're like, hold up.
Sorry. We have to go back.
Who moves from California to Oklahoma? Well, they moved there for work. So employment. I feel like it's one of the biggest. We have an increasing mobile world, and people are moving for work a lot. So like you and me, we both work from home a little bit. But lately you've been getting on planes a lot. And how'd you get started? Like, this is the 6 Degrees YouTube channel, so a lot of people know you as executive director, but what were you doing before that?
My career before 6 Degrees was all in business development and sales. So the first part of my career, really starting in college, I started working for a cell phone company, Singular Wireless at the time, dating myself a bit. And then that eventually became AT&T. I graduated from University of Redlands in Southern California and immediately got a job at ADP, which is a payroll company. And that will teach you a thing or two about sales. It's a grind, but it definitely set me up, I think, for success with, the future. The next, say, like 15 years of my career was spent in sales. And the last sales job I really held before moving over to 6 Degrees was electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So I was one of the early pioneers in that space, helping to install fast chargers primarily in markets across the country. And so, it was fun and it was exciting, and it was really easy to get appointments with people because everyone was like, even if they didn't have an EV, they wanted to hear what the future of it looked like and what it felt like. And no, it was wonderful. But once I really realized that I could have a career where I was leaning into my purpose and helping people every day, as altruistic as that sounds, I had to make the leap. So,
we have another connection there because my first job was I sold phones and batteries at Radio Shack.
You did? Yeah. Radio Shack. That is also a bit of a timestamp, my friend.
Right. I know. I remember during my first interview, it was like in the back storage area of a Radio Shack store, and the manager said, "I really like you. I think you're going to do really well. And in about 3 months, you're going to be leading the whole floor. So because of that, we're going to skip your training. We're going to just immediately put you on the floor to sell." And at the time, I was flattered. I was like 18 years old. I was really flattered. I was like, sweet. But what I didn't know, and you probably learned this, that you have to know the product you're selling. And I did not know the product at all. They just were like, we're skipping training. You're so good at talking to people. So I was there for 3 months. It was terrible. Miserable. And then I left. Yeah, miserable. Like, people were outselling me like crazy, of course, because they actually knew what they were talking about. But I left after 3 months to go to college. And I remember the person who hired me, the guy who skipped my training, he also wouldn't accept my 2-week resignation. So I was like, oh gosh, it just wasn't a good situation.
No, seems like he needed some leadership training. No, I mean, I think the number one thing that happens when you start a new sales job, and what has helped me for sure, was telling myself that in 6 months, I would know what I was talking about. Like, I had to have that like foresight to know that like, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't understand the day-to-day. I don't understand the lingo, the products, those sorts of things. But in 6 months, I will. And
Yeah.
so I just need to keep kind of plugging away. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, that's like the most miserable part. It's actually a big reason, I think, why EVs did not take off as strongly in the beginning of the market, because, you know, none of the salespeople knew how to sell the Nissan Leaf. Like, they were used to selling the Altima. They were used to selling all these other vehicles they actually got paid more on. So they didn't have a vested interest in starting to try to understand an electric vehicle. And the customers that were coming in for electric vehicles, I say this because I love them and I also drive an EV, like uber nerds. Like, early adopters of EVs were like very nerdy. And so
Sure.
they would often come in and want to talk about all the things that they knew, why they were so smart. It wasn't like they were having a conversation. They were just asking questions to be like, I know the answer to that. And so a lot of salespeople were really turned off by that. So they often would have just like one person at every dealership that became like the EV champion, like that understood EVs, if they were lucky. But then when Tesla came onto the market, there was no other car. So everyone that worked for Tesla, you of course learned about the car. There wasn't a competing car. There wasn't a gas car that they could get paid more on to divert attention. And so that kind of is when the market finally started shifting. But I think a lot of it had to do with training and understanding what they were selling.
They just lacked the education for the salespeople.
Yeah.
What was the pivot from sales to getting involved with 6 Degrees?
Yeah. When I moved here from California to Northern Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C., I started getting involved in networking events. I happened upon a chamber event, which was kind of my first time going to a business chamber event. I sought out the president and I said, "Hey, I'm new here. I work for the sales company. Love to get involved." And he said, "Oh my God, absolutely." And I said, do you have any board positions available?" I didn't even know what I was asking. He immediately lit up and was like, "Yes."
Yeah.
Looking back now, I realize like actually how much work it is to be on a board, especially the board of a chamber.
Right.
But that was my first time stepping into a board of directors role, where I really got to use insights and skill sets that I didn't even know I had. I think that for a long time, I thought I had to stay in sales because I was kind of pigeonholed. I was really good at sales. I was making great money at sales. I can't like walk away from that. But also, I didn't have another skill set. I thought like, I'm a salesperson. That's what I have to offer. Sitting on these boards, one became a second. And then I started sitting on like a nonprofit board for youth education. I quickly got to see how I could leverage all this strategy, all of this ideation, things that I wasn't able to tap into when I was an individual contributor at a sales company, right? They wanted me to do one thing and one thing well, make them lots of money. They weren't really looking for my any innovation, right? Any ideas around other ways they could strengthen a company. And it was really, really fulfilling. And when I started working for nonprofits, seeing that tangible impact on people's lives, that had always been something inside of me. It's always been like a very highly empathetic person, almost to a fault, I think. And when I was faced with this opportunity to leave the sales world and come into 6 Degrees full time, I just felt like it was what I had been almost training for my entire life.
Were you a Kevin Bacon fan prior to joining?
Yeah, I was. I always laugh because I had been, I love movies, and Kevin has been in so many movies and so many like movies that I grew up watching like over and over again. And when I started working here, I remember pulling up IMDb because I had some nephews that were quite younger, and they were like, "Who's Kevin Bacon?" As one does when they're like Gen Z. And my sister and my brother were like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you guys don't know who Kevin Bacon is." And they pulled up the IMDb, and then I was even like, "God, he has literally been in so many things." I'm like, "That's right. He was in, Stupid Crazy Love. And, oh yeah, that's right. Few Good Men, all of these like iconic roles, and a lot of like really fun cameos." But yeah, so I was always a really big fan of his work. And it was intimidating at first, right? Because you don't know how you're going to really react in those situations and how this person's going to be off the screen.
I think that's probably a very interesting aspect of what you do is you work for a nonprofit, but it's also a nonprofit with a really well-known person. So like, navigating that, what's that been like?
Yeah. Navigating working with an entertainer in philanthropy can be very tricky. I think that I am very lucky in the terms that Kevin is a very active principal. He's very involved in this work. He's a busy guy, but 6 Degrees is one of the core parts of what he cares about. Everyone on his team, from his publicist and manager and social media teams, they all know that there's like a 3-prong approach. It's Kevin's acting, Kevin's music career, and 6 Degrees. And that is really, really important. Kevin has, because he is so available and he cares about this stuff, but he also has a lot of humility. He'll say, like, I don't know about this. Like, I'm not the spokesperson for this. I shouldn't be the person that's speaking to this. Let's center the people who should be speaking. He's also very differential. He'll definitely go, hey, Stacy, I want you to tackle this. You know, you're the expert here. He just exercises a lot of humility, which is not always the case with stars, I think, especially someone that has been famous almost their entire life, right? For more time than they've not been famous. And so for me, it was really easy to get comfortable with him because he made it so comfortable. You know, the first time I met him, he asked me lots of questions about my family and my siblings and where I grew up, and my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, and he genuinely cared, right? Like, he genuinely cared. And so I had to obviously learn a lot of things, because not working in entertainment, being with someone like Kevin, when you're out in public, you know, depending on where you are, people approach them, they get very handsy, or they, you know, don't really understand boundaries and those sorts of things. And Kevin's not one of those people that always has a way of going about things. You know, sometimes he'll want to sign autographs. Other times he's eating, or, you know, like anybody, like he's with his family. And so there's a nuance, because he's a human being. And so he has, you know, different feelings during different times. But I just had to really get comfortable with, you know, allowing him to lead, and then knowing when I needed to kind of step in and keep things moving for scheduling and those types of things. So it's interesting. There's like a portion of your role that's really focused on the philanthropy piece, but then I had to really get up to speed and how to kind of manage like that the whole sphere of influence that he has around him as well.
Have there been moments where you find yourself thinking, oh, dang, this is different than just the average organization? This is much higher scale.
Like, I mean, and I probably wouldn't even frame it as like higher scale. It's just, I think how you first framed it, it's just different, right? I think a lot of people see a celebrity and they think, oh, if I just had a celebrity, it would make things so much better for my organization. If I just had a spokesperson to say that they loved our work, like, it would unlock the keys to donation freedom. And oftentimes that's not the case, especially because we're a 501c3. A lot of people think we're a foundation, but we're not. The reason why we're a 501c3 is because all of our work is built around connection and people coming together in community. And we know that no single person or no single organization is going to solve any cause completely alone. And unfortunately, in the nonprofit world, I think that we still have people that operate in this like me mindset. Like, this is my cause. I'm the best at this. Right. They're afraid that someone else is going to come and take their donor or take their visibility in some type of way, as opposed to how I operate and how 6 Degrees operates, which is that a rising tide lifts all boats. We have to work collectively. It takes collective impact to see the collective change that we want to see in this world. And so it is interesting, because sometimes having Kevin or a principal like Kevin at the helm will help open doors to have conversations. But sometimes it can be very difficult to acquire funding for some really meaningful projects because they're like, well, the celebrity can just take care of that. But I don't think they understand the greater concept here that we have to have joint buy-in. It's so often, I mean, there's lots of industries that work like this, but they say, offering something for free, no one wants that. People need to feel like they have sweat equity involved in order to show up and really benefit from something that's handed to them, right? And so we really work collaboratively with lots of different organizations, but it can be, I think it can be a double-edged sword sometime, but we definitely benefit greatly because he is so involved, because he wants to support our works, because he helps to raise the profile of these causes and these network partners. That's what we call the nonprofits we support. He helps raise their profile and attention to them in times that they need it the most. So, I feel like every day is a little different, but it's exciting.
With your involvement with 6 Degrees, in addition to that, I've also seen that you're getting on some big stages right now. You just did the TEDx talk, and it looked like a lot of fun. What was that experience like, giving a TEDx talk?
So a little bit about me that I didn't touch on in the beginning is that I'm actually a curator of TEDx, a TEDx itself, and TEDx Tyson specifically. And so I've coached some 55 plus different people on their talks. And I have been told that we have a pretty intensive program, but we deliver incredible talks. And we believe that it's a stage like no other. And we don't want someone with a canned speech that they've given a million times. We want someone to go deeper and tap into a story that they haven't yet shared. And I put myself through that same process, and it was hard. And I will say that I have a whole level of additional respect for the speakers that I've worked with over the years, because there is something that feels very big and special about a TEDx stage, a TED stage, that red circle, if you will. And so I really busted my butt. I will say that it's the hardest I'd ever worked on anything in terms of a topic and delivering a speech. And it was one of the most fulfilling times in my life. And I definitely feel really, really proud of the talk that I delivered, and really excited to hear people's thoughts about it.
When you're on stage, were you like, I'm doing it, or did that happen when you left the stage?
Oh, absolutely. What happened was I did all the things. I prayed because I'm a prayerful person. I meditated with like a person led me through a meditation with tea and the whole 9 yards. About 45 minutes before I went on stage. I listened to another TEDx that talked about how you need to be big. You need to make yourself big so you feel really confident. So
the
before I went
pose.
on, I did the power pose. You know what I mean? And when I stepped out onto that stage, I didn't have an ounce of nerves, which has never happened in my life. I get nervous speaking in front of 5 people. And I walked out on a stage with more than 1,500 and felt completely centered. It was clearly because I prepared, right? It was because I prepared, and I told myself this wasn't about me. This was about someone in the audience or someone that was going to be listening online later when it was published that needed this talk. And so when you, once again, focus outward, you take a lot of the pressure off, because it's not about you. It's not about what you look like. It's not about, oh, what if I stumble? What if I say? No, it's about, this is for someone else. It shifts those nerves in a way that really help you to be a lot more calm and a lot more ready for the moment, I think. But yeah, it was really special.
Is it tough though with TEDx talks, because it's a whole bunch of talks back to back to back, right? So in one way, you're thinking about an audience who sat down and listened. So you want to make your talk a bit different, but you're also probably psyching yourself up because you hear applause for the last person and you know someone's coming up next behind you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I asked to go as early as possible.
Yeah.
I may or may not have gone as early as possible.
Yeah.
But I did. I really wanted to sit out and watch all of my fellow speakers.
Yeah.
But I couldn't, until it was my time to go out. I really sat in the back and kind of just felt centered.
Mm-hmm.
I think I caught maybe one or two talks, and then I went in the back for the length of time before my talk. I got to go before lunch, which I think was important. And then I was able to give my talk. And then afterwards, I was able to enjoy every moment of the rest of the talks. But
the best feeling when you finish and then you get to chill and watch.
Just chill and enjoy.
Yeah.
I felt terrible for the people who had to go absolutely last,
Right.
But I also felt like some of the speakers, they went last, they were smart. Like there were some people that were like not nervous at all,
Mm-hmm.
And I respect that. But I also think nerves are very healthy. Nerves tell us that this is an important moment and it should be taken serious. And so I think I had like a healthy set of nerves. But like I said, when I stepped out, I had done everything I was supposed to do to prepare for that moment. So you have to, at some point, just like let go and say, well, here goes nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing else you can do. And so, no, it was, I am glad it's behind me though, because it was middle of summer. I was practicing. I turned 40. So I was like, it was 2 days after my 40th birthday.
Wow.
So it was even hard to be like celebratory and really in that moment because I
Right.
just had this big, huge thing kind of still there. And so after that, I really got to enjoy the rest of summer.
You got to celebrate your 40th birthday.
I did.
Yeah. I want to do one and I need to look more into it. But what would be like 3 potentially unexpected tips you'd give to someone who aspires to speak on a TEDx stage?
That's a really good question. 3 tips. I would say, have an idea worth sharing that seems pretty standard, as that is, that was TED's tagline for a long time. Now I think it's ideas change everything. But not every talk is a TED talk, is a worthy TED talk. And I think that there's questions you have to ask yourself. Why does someone want to hear this? Why is this important? Am I the person that should be delivering? I think that's a question sometimes that we're afraid to ask ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Not every message should be narrated and given by the person that wants to give it. So I definitely think making sure that your idea is, really well crafted and that you have an idea worth sharing. 2, I would say, and this is the most important, don't write your talk. Don't pre-write your talk. I think that it's really, really important that when you're applying to TEDx's, that you are looking at the theme of that specific TEDx, that audience, the time period, what's happening. And once you've been accepted, to really start the process of writing your talk at that point. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you're going to give that talk to different audiences in different parts. Essentially, your TED Talk is just going to be a recanned jargon of a keynote or something else you've shared. And this really should be singular and only given to the audience that you give it to. And lastly, I would say work with a coach. It's really, really important. The number one thing I hear from people I coach on their TED Talks are, I'm not going to memorize it. I don't want it to sound,
robotic,
like rehearsed and robotic. And I laugh so hard at that because I'm like, okay, I work for an entertainer. I could not imagine if Kevin said, I'm not going to memorize those lines because I don't want it to sound robotic.
Right.
Think about that. You have to memorize them and get so comfortable with them that 1, nerves won't matter because you won't have them. 2, if you skip a line, guess what? You'll be able to feed it back in on the other side because you know the material so well. Then once you know the material so well, you can really go there with the emotion, right? You can go there with feeling it, with really being present in the moment. But if you have not memorized it, what happens is you have, 3 to 18 minutes. The best TED Talks are shorter, right? So say 10 minutes. You have 10 minutes to leave an audience with this feeling of, I need to do something with that. I need to tell someone about that. I need to explore this further. And I can't tell you how many really terrible talks I have seen where people go on these rabbit trails of the work that they do and their experiences. And you could tell that there's just not any real concise through line that they're trying to hit. And so, third, I would say definitely work with a coach and be prepared to memorize every single line.
What was the through line for your talk?
It's a good question. My through line was all about our need to lean into the uncomfortable and start showing up for one another again, because we are facing an epidemic around isolation. And isolation, I think people have routinely thought about it as, sitting alone at home like a recluse. But isolation is really the idea of what this does. You're in an elevator, you're on your phone. You're not saying hi to someone. You're in a doctor's office. You're not talking to anybody. You're on your phone. You're waiting for your table at a restaurant. You're looking down at your phone. Every opportunity we used to have to engage with one another in community, to make people feel seen, valued, visible, has all but disappeared. So it takes really intentional actions daily, small actions, but very intentional, I think, to change the course of humanity, and to tap back into our humanity so that we can start showing up for one another. And so my talk is really a 5-step process that I've created called the CRAFT method, where I really talk about how to implement that every day, the importance of implementing that, and the outcomes that, we hope to see when those things are done at mass scale.
So that's the question of, what do I want my audience to do after my talk? For your talk, it was to start implementing this CRAFT method.
Exactly. Yeah. It was that they would walk out and, one, feel a little bit of conviction, not in a bad way, but I think that if we want to make change, we have to realize that we're part of the problem, right? That we have a part to play in the solution, even more so. And that they could start immediately. They could start with a hello to somebody. They could start by holding the door to the person that was coming out of the auditorium behind them, instead of trying to rush the food line. Maybe not cutting someone off, maybe letting someone go first.
Yeah.
You're laughing because we know we all do that, right? Like, it's like I talk about this in my TED Talk, but I laugh because I used to go to the airport all the time and be one of those people that needed to rush and to hurry up to get in line to sit on a plane to not move, right? And I started implementing this thing where I just let everyone shuffle in front of me, and I didn't hold a resentment towards them.
Yeah.
I used to, you
right.
cutting me off, it's so rude. And I'm seething while they feel nothing. And I've let that go. And I feel so much better. I feel nicer. I feel kinder. I'm more calm about it. It doesn't matter. We're all going the same place, right?
Yeah.
But little things that will change your social and emotional health, your mental well-being. It'll affect others in your community. It'll help us to see how much more connected we are, how much more similar we are.
You had mentioned this question, am I the person that should be delivering this message? What makes you the person that should be delivering that message?
You are coming for the fences, Chris. So for those of our listeners that maybe have heard some of my history, I can kind of reshare it. I grew up with a single mom And I experienced, we were on social benefits, and my mom had to volunteer and donate time so I could play sports and I could do all the things. And throughout a lot of these like difficult times in my life, people and community circled my family. Friends, parents, people from our church, people that I played volleyball with, and really helped support my mother as well. And I will say that, like, because of that connection, because of that outpouring, it was really ingrained in me how important it was to then show up for others. And then I had continuous experiences in my life that really continue to highlight that, some of which I share. Life altering things that happened in my life where I thought people would show up that didn't. And then the people that you would never expect to show up did. Wow. And it left an imprint on my heart and my life that I just made me forever changed. And so I felt like I had to tell this story and I had to encourage people because I saw what it felt like to think that you would be surrounded and supported by wonderful people and not have the people there that you really, really thought would be there. Understanding then why they didn't show up. A lot of it's because we don't like to be uncomfortable. So I wanted to extend empathy to those people in the audience that maybe didn't show up the way they can be proud of showing up, but letting people see that they have another chance. They can start today. They can make that impact. And one of the steps in my method is about remodeling. So some people think about role modeling, be who you want other people to see. But this idea of remodeling is really around when we mess up, recognizing that we messed up, and then immediately addressing it so that we can exercise humility and help the people that are witnessing it to be encouraged to do the same. Because that's when we really start making changes, when people see that that person took ownership of that. Right. I could do that. I can be inspired to do that. It's okay to mess up. It's okay to take ownership of it. And so I think remodeling is one of the most important components of reconnecting with each other and showing up and realizing that we have to be empathetic. We have to exercise, humility and humanity because we're going to mess up. We all are. So we have to create space for each other for that as well.
Okay, I have a question that I ask a lot of people, and I'm curious about your answer. It's a bit of a pivot, but it connects to your point about relating and having conversation. So we look at life with days, weeks, months, years. We can always look at back. For instance, you said you just had your 40th, so 40 years. Now, in that 40 years, we can also look back on life as conversations, right? Like, here are some of the biggest conversations I've had in my life. And I'm curious for you, what comes to mind when you think about some of the biggest conversations you've had?
Some of the biggest conversations I've had in my life. Kind of leaning into this idea of leaning into the discomfort. Most recently, I reconnected with my stepfather, who raised me to a certain point. And after my parents split up, we separated ways. And that was really hard. We kind of would see each other from time to time, exchange messages from time to time. But there was definitely a gap in our relationship. We were more or less estranged. And we recently reconnected. My mother has since passed away. And I have kind of missed that void of having a parent alive. And we had this conversation just recently where there were a lot of tears. And it reminded me of something. So I was really afraid, I think, to tell him how much I loved him as my father and how hurt I was and how sad I was for, the times he missed in my life, getting married and having children and those sorts of things. But how grateful I am that he's now in my life again. And as he is the same way. And it was a really hard but beautiful conversation, like I said, and it was really healing. And at the end, he said something that I will never forget. And he said, we can have hard conversations, and I will always be here to have hard conversations with you.
Wow.
And I think that was one of the most meaningful things anyone's ever told me, because in that moment, I realized that so many conversations we don't have because we're afraid of the person's reaction. Even if we know that we really need to have them, even if we know that they're really uncomfortable, we're afraid because oftentimes when we have hard conversations, people do react poorly. We don't always meet people with kindness and openness and empathy and say, oh, I'm really sorry you feel that way. I'm really sorry that I played a part in how you felt. That wasn't my intention. Let's talk and work through this, right? But his response of recognizing that it was hard and it was difficult, and he said, and we're going to have more hard conversations, and I'll always have them with you.
Mm.
And there is something really beautiful about the humanity of that, about letting someone know that you're going to be with them in the hard stuff just as much as you're going to be with them in the good stuff.
Yeah, that's really meaningful.
Life is hard. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
What about your mom? What were some of your favorite things about your mom?
Oh, God, everything. She was one of the most hospitable, forgiving, really loving people. She was very funny. We laughed a lot. She's my best friend. I talk to her every single day, like every day. We had those relationships where like I'd call her from the car while I was driving, and like we'd say a few words, and she was doing stuff too, but like we would sit there in silence just to be on the phone with each other, She was an amazing cook. I mean, everything. This woman she was Italian, and she would win salsa making contests at her church and beat out women that were making salsa their entire lives. I mean,
right.
I dated this guy that was Israeli one time, and for his birthday, she made butter chicken and tikka masala. She like catered like this big thing of food, and his friends could not believe that this Black girl's mother catered this food for the party. Like, she was incredible. And I think she showed love through her food. And she kind of had an open door policy. Like, our holidays, there was always someone that didn't have somewhere to go or didn't have a family to be with. Even people that along the way had really dishonored my mom's friendship, had really hurt her along the way. She just had this way of forgiving people that sometimes was really hard. Growing up, someone hurts your parent, or you're just like, you can hold that vendetta. Like, that's your parent. You love them. Like, how dare someone cross them or do something to be harmful to them? But my mom she always had this place of like understanding and empathizing with where this person might have been coming from and the hurt that they may have experienced in life that caused this type of reaction or whatever. And then they would be with us at Thanksgiving. And I think that type of abundant love and forgiveness was something that etched its way into my heart. And I can only hope to be a fraction of that, for my children and to show them the same. But she was a good time. She was a really good time.
And she could crack you up. You'd be laughing a lot.
So much. I mean, so much. She was a firecracker, She grew up East Coast. I was actually born in Pittsburgh, but I moved to California when I was very little. And so she had all brothers and, was the second to youngest and was kind of a tomboy. And you know what I mean? And then when she grew up, she got saved, but she had this like spunk about her and this sass about her. And she could cut it up and poke fun and make you laugh. And She didn't like so much when you poked fun back at her.
Mm-hmm.
She was really good at poking fun at others.
Yeah.
No.
She's like, hold up. Why y'all
like,
coming after me?
Leave me alone. Leave me alone. You're picking on me. Like, picking on you. You literally just said all this other stuff to us.
Right.
So she wasn't so thick-skinned, but she definitely had a really fun sense of humor. And I'm just really grateful for the time I had with her.
Well, she sounds like an awesome person. And this has been a success because I know a lot more about you. So I imagine the people watching and listening also know a lot more. But I do have one last question. And that is, what is one thing you wish more people knew about you?
Oh, man.
Take your time, too.
I'm going to.
Yeah, this is always the hardest question because most people say they're an open book, but maybe they are. Yet there always is, and I'm curious about what's yours.
I think the one thing I wish people knew about me is that I'm actually like a pretty sensitive person. I think most of my life, people have seen this like, oh, you're so strong and resilient, and you're like a top salesperson. You're you're an executive woman and a working mom, and because of that, sometimes people meet me with a lot more. I don't know, like sometimes like tension or are just less soft, I think, sometimes with me. And that can be hard because just because you have been forced to be strong your whole life and you face things in your life that have caused you to really have a show of strength doesn't mean that you shouldn't also be met with a ton of compassion. And so that is something that I wish people would know about me. I don't think I talk about it often. I think that we live in a world where when you say, I wish you could be, it's like, oh, you're too this, you're too that, you're too sensitive. It's considered a weakness, but I do think that saying where you have your needs is actually a strength. You help people understand how to better work with you and relate to you and how to understand you. So yeah, that I am a pretty sensitive person. And that's probably why I do this work, because my heart goes out to people in a really deep way. And I also am someone that is, sometimes easily offended, easily hurt. I think it's something that I've worked on my entire life and I'll continue to work on. But I do think that it is inevitably part of me, that I'm just someone that feels very deeply. And so there you go, Chris. You got me to open up about something I don't like to open up about. Hey,
Stacy, you are crushing it. And for those who are watching, we would love for you to subscribe to the YouTube channel and get more involved with 6 Degrees. It's been really fun seeing and hearing about all that you all are doing. And you got one TEDx talk under your belt. I imagine there's going to be a lot of more big talks for your future. So thank you for the conversation, Stacy. It's been a blast.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate you.